I know what it's like to be like on a flight delay with your heart pounding because you're going to miss the show. Yeah. And then you make the show and the show sucks because you've spent all day freaking out. The whole myth of you need to be sad to be creative. It's like, no. Gary's the perfect example. And he's doing it right now as we speak of like, Gary went out and not only did he not sacrifice his creativity, look at the level of organization and versatility you're able to have in all these other ways that facilitate your creativity that are impossible to achieve if you can't get out of bed in the morning.
We already know what helps. Connection is the cure. It's our deep and meaningful relationships that give us hope and healing. Welcome to This Helps. I'm Marlon Morgan. Join us as we practice authentic and vulnerable conversations that inspire us to go deeper with the people in our own lives. Two of my favorite comedians of all time, Gary Gulman and Chris Gethard, joined us for a conversation in Brooklyn. You were single-handedly our live audience. So
your first live audience.
Yeah. Yes. And that's when you fell in love with the show. And you said, I have to be part of this. I'll never not devote my life to This Helps.
I said, Jeremiah, get out of here. I'm coming in.
That's when it started. You started like this whole kind of like smear campaign on one of my good friends, and our first co-host on the show was Jeremiah Aha, and he actually joins us here. But it was then when the rivalry started, because you saw him in person, you had envy in your heart. And from then on, it's sort of been this like incremental, campaign, if you will, to make sure he's out and you're in. You said, I need to produce it and star in it.
I'm so glad we're finally talking about it. Yeah, exactly.
That's what big stars do.
That's what big stars do. And that's
I'll produce it. I want to executive produce it, and I want to have top billing.
That's right.
So welcome, and I'm so glad you did.
And in fact, I was so serious about it that now I'm here on the episode after all.
It's like you're rewriting history from that moment. And so I made the mistake. I was so anxious that I wasn't going to have enough energy that I overdid it with the caffeine like at night. And so I was like flop sweating. So I'm glad we have the video now so that you can see how pasty and sweaty I was.
You're setting people up, but what they're going to hear is somebody who's already a pro at this. It's a great interview, and you don't seem flop sweaty. Mom spaghetti. I couldn't. I was trying to.
No, I appreciate that,
and I had.
No, I'm glad you. Okay. I'm glad you brought up Marshall Mathers. Also, another Eminem. I think people when they meet him say, "Oh, like Marlon Morgan," and he's like, "Yeah, Eminem, just like Marlon Morgan." So
the reason we're sharing this episode right now when we are is we just had the Chris Duffy episode, which is all about humor and mental health and laughing more and keeping track of the things that really make you laugh.
Yeah. And there's also, because of Chris, he said, like, if this podcast ever gets like popular and people that are in my industry start coming on more and they're named Chris, you can't ever have that guest on and not have this episode that I just recorded follow that. So it's sort of like a legal obligation.
That's true too.
As well. It really was a time where for both me and Jeremiah, who of course is still doing well, even without being a co-host on the show. He's somehow made something of himself, even without this incredible opportunity. So he's doing great. Him and I still talk about this moment and then getting ready to interview Chris. And that had a different pressure because it was like, I really, like this person and know them. And then Gary, as one of the smartest comics, if not the, and he's also known for, he's like a comics comic. So like the reason that I wanted to have both of Chris and Gary on is because Chris obviously broke the ceiling for, talking about mental health on a comedy special on HBO. I think it's back to the name HBO, so this will be relevant for another 2 months until they change it. But, he came out, I think, in 2017 with Career Suicide, which was it made me feel so seen as someone who has struggled with depression and anxiety and also loves jokes. And he really was so bold and confident, but really brave that it could have been career suicide, but it wasn't. It was the opposite, and it helped so many people. And he talks about being the person who, after his shows, people sort of saw him as, one of their favorite comics, but also had this crazy connection to him and his struggle with mental health and just the different medicines he's tried and the therapy. His therapist, Barb, comes up a lot. And then the whole time I was also a fan of Gary. He would say little things here and there in his previous specials before 2020. In 2020, he came out with The Great Depression, which really showed an intimate view of his life with depression and going through treatment, and his girlfriend, I think it was his girlfriend at the time, now wife, Sade, which he calls his Sade, not the Sade. And it's just a really honest look at what it's like for someone who loves to be happy, who loves jokes, who loves comedy, to be so unreasonably unhappy and to be struggling. So he gets into that with us. Making depression and anxiety and mental health struggles as funny as they can be while still being loving and supportive is an art. It's one that both Chris and Gary have individually, I would say, mastered more than anyone else in the world that I know of. And I can't wait for you to hear this show. My hope is that you can feel the same way, seen, cared about, but also empowered to kind of laugh at some of the things that really kind of are challenging and hurt us.
Beautiful. I think it's such a helpful episode. And the cool thing, too, is that both Chris Gethard and Gary Gulman are on the road pretty much right now. If you're listening to this on Thursday, Gary is in San Francisco tomorrow night. And then in February, he'll be on the East Coast. And Gethard is recording his podcast live 3 dates next weekend.
That's great. So Gary's on a stand-up tour. Do we know what the tour is called?
He's doing a couple of different ones. So he's working out new material. Some dates are his current hour, which is called Grandiloquent. And then he's also touring for Misfit as well. So
for his book Misfit. And then Chris he's going to do Beautiful Anonymous, his podcast, one of Time's top 100 podcasts of all time. So that'll be good. Go see that live. Go see Gary. I would say this. I did get a chance to see Gary's one-person show, Grandiloquent, and it was all the things I described earlier that The Great Depression was, but even more intimate, and he brings you through it a whole night of. It's emotional, but it's funny, and it's incredible.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, I feel very lucky that we get to share this episode with our listeners. And if you're listening to it on the podcast, go head over to YouTube and watch it there and see all of these very funny people.
I remember the first time I went to therapy, it seemed so one-sided that I was doing most of the talking. I remember and thinking, I wish this guy would interrupt me more and make comments. And
did you feel like he wasn't listening, or did you feel like you wanted him to engage more so that you knew everything was okay?
I think I wanted him to solve my problems out loud right away. I didn't know how it
give you the
worked.
answers.
But I do know that it felt really good to tell these traumas for the first time.
Yeah, to get it out.
That was such a relief, and because I'd kept them to myself for so long, or at least it felt like a long time. It was probably 4 years of high school that I kind of unloaded on this guy my freshman year of college.
How many did you go through before you found one you liked?
The first one.
Really?
Yeah. It was, I
I talked about it in a This American Life episode, I think, where I was playing college football and went home for our first break after 3 weeks of training camp and wanted to quit. And so they arranged for me to see a therapist. My brother had suggested I talk to a therapist. He's really smart and knew things. And so I went back. I went to there was a liaison between the educational part of the football team and the college football team and the trainer, and they arranged it so that I went to see this man named Dr. Tom McGinnis, and he had just started at the school too that summer. It was in August. I went to his office and we talked for 50 minutes exactly.
That's pretty progressive for the college football team to,
yes,
it
was huge. But of course he said to the coaches or whoever he had to talk to, he said, there is a possibility that you won't want to play football after. and he was right. Yeah. He drove me up on the knee to play football.
Shout out Boston College.
Yeah.
That's great. With Barb, same with you, Chris, same question.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, I had seen, when I was 22, I think I saw a very cold psychiatrist at the same, it was I would have to drive to, it must have been Verona or Caldwell, New Jersey on Bloomfield Avenue. And it was just like one of these nondescript buildings where when you drive by, you're like, what is it? And it's a bunch of medical offices and very sterile vibe. And the psychiatrist, it was like, I went and saw the therapist for a while and he was a nice enough guy. And then the psychiatrist would prescribe me meds and he seemed very uninterested in like actually engaging. Like I immediately got the sense that it was like, he talks to you, I'll write you the prescriptions. I'm just going to go down a checklist of stuff he put out there. And I found it very off-putting and to the point where I felt like I wasn't connecting with the therapist at all. And then he, at one point was like, you're just getting out of college and I actually have a lot of young clients and I'm starting a group and I thought you'd be a good leader for like a group. And I was like, I thought we were on the same page about our feelings for each other. Like I thought you weren't really feeling me because I'm not, and I was like, I don't know. And then I eventually did.
He needed you.
Yeah, I eventually moved to LA short notice, and that got bad because that was, I talk about Incur Suicide. They prescribed me, I think they were legally allowed to prescribe me 3 months worth of drugs, and then my job got extended, and when they just weren't calling me back. And then they were pretty curt on the phone about like, we're not going to prescribe over the phone. We don't know if you're ever coming back. And I was like, I'm like 23. I've never been this far away from my family and I just need someone to tell me what to do. And it was bad. And then it turned me off of therapy for like 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And then it became extremely clear that I needed to go back. And when I met Barb, it was like an emergency type thing. I had a friend who was, the way I found Barb was, there was a guy at the UCB theater who was an emergency room doctor. And then he was just like doing improv at nights. And I called him and was like, hey, I don't want to put you out, but do you have any colleagues who can see me short notice because I'm in bad shape? And he was like, well, this is not like a colleague, but actually like there's this nurse practitioner that I once saw and I thought she was pretty cool. And she helped me out short notice. He gave me her number. And I'll never forget the first session, she dropped the F-bomb like 3 or 4 times.
There we go.
And then told me she was from Linden, New Jersey. And I was like, I've been seeing her
game over
since 2007.
That's great.
I still talk to her. But
That's
like,
all you needed to hear.
Yeah. It's funny because I called her out about that. And when she saw Career Suicide, it was hard for her in some ways. She was very flattered. And so I remember like she came and saw it in New York off Broadway. And I knew she was there.
That last
and
line.
She just didn't come backstage. I cleared it all with her. I told her, but she just like didn't come backstage.
Wow.
And then I texted her. I'm like texting my shrink, and I'm like, "Hey, are you okay?" Like, I'm checking in with my
You're
shrink.
texting her. Are you okay?
And then I just didn't hear back from her for like an hour. And then I'll never forget. She wrote back, and she was like, "The character of Barb sounds like a real hero, though I must admit I do not recognize who she is." It was something like that. And then she later told me, she was like, yeah, like, I don't curse with everyone. Like, I don't do all this crazy stuff with everyone. I just got a sense with you right away that you were living kind of a pretty strange artist's life. And you cursed a bunch coming out of the gate with your big meltdown rant. So I started cursing too, and I was like, oh, in my mind, I was like, the shrink cursed. This is awesome. And then years later, she's like, I was matching what you were giving me to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Oh, right.
That's so interesting.
Yep.
She's like, not everyone I talked to. She was like, she told me there were some people who saw it who started reaching out to her immediately. I'm like that. Because I also, when I was doing it off Broadway, changed her name to Deb. And she was like, Deb is not as funny as Barb. And I was like,
She's right.
She's right.
She's right about that.
A shrink named Barb is funnier than a shrink named Deb. And she's like, it has to be Barb. She's like, there's enough shrinks in the New York area named Barb that will be good. But she only a few people guessed, but that there were a bunch of patients of hers that were kind of shocked because she was like, my behavior with them is so different than with you. So yeah, but I knew as soon as I found out she was from Jersey and she was dropping F-bombs, I was like, it's a lot better than those other guys. A lot better.
That's awesome.
And I've never heard from them. I have no idea if they even remember me or if they know that I kind of slammed them on my HBO special.
And I can't remember, did Barb prescribe medicine as well?
Barb does prescribe,
okay.
yeah.
All right, that's
She's
right.
a nurse practitioner.
That's another
Yeah.
funny thing. So when I did the show off Broadway, I have a friend who's a psychologist. Psychologists can't prescribe.
Psychologists cannot psychiatrists
prescribe.
can.
Yes. So
and nurse practitioner can, but usually under a psychiatrist.
So I have a friend, my wife's best friend, her partner's a psychologist, and they saw the show and he was very upset.
Mm.
And he was like, dude, what is this thing where you're talking about? She's telling you all these details of her personal life and recommending all this stuff to you that's like not FDA approved and wants you to go do like a numerological chart and all this stuff. She's been in a car with your dad. Like, he's like, this is not safe. Like,
The
this is
dual
not
relationship is there. Yeah.
okay. And then he actually texted me again like a week or two later and was like, I've been thinking about it more and more. And like, she provided what you needed. And I don't know if someone's standard was going to keep you safe. And she kept you safe. So I'm okay with it. So point being though, I said to him, I was like, can you guess what her certification is? And I don't know the whole world of division, but I will say he's not the only person I've met who has been in the psychiatric field who, when they find out Barb is a nurse practitioner, they're like, oh, these nurse practitioners.
People love to talk trash
They
about
do talk
like
trash.
the,
and I think that the cliche or the stereotype is that they can kind of like maybe sneak through the back door on some of the regulations that you have to get for the other
That's
stuff.
true.
But her perspective is like, she's like, I read all the research, I stay up on everything. And also like, I think there are things that are not working and that are outdated that I would like to move on from. And it's hard for me to apologize for that if it's helping my patients.
She's trying to innovate. And then you have maybe, I don't want to call this person the old guard because I don't know, if they really are or not. But sometimes you'll have people, who have any reason not to innovate or just say, like, you're my friend, I care about you. Like, I've gotten like that when a friend goes to therapy and like they said, what? They said, what? I would have therapized you way better than that, just like, but it's like a sense of pride. So everybody's got
Of
that.
course,
You gotta
yeah.
watch out
But I've
for
had
it.
some people who were worried about me and I'm like, no,
No, it worked.
yeah.
I mean, did it work?
I'm still with her, 17 years later, And now our sessions are largely like, there have legitimately been sessions where she's just like telling me she has like a pet pigeon. She lives in Mexico now. She has a pet pigeon that can't fly. And it's just her giving me updates on how her pet pigeon Crosby.
Sure, it's not a rat. I think it
No,
sounds
it's a
like
pigeon.
Are you sure she's not Bert from Sesame Street?
Dude, it's
Because that's the only other
It is
time
wild,
I've heard of a pet
and like,
pigeon.
sometimes we
Yeah.
just talk about her pigeon.
Yeah.
And then I'll realize, there was a lesson in there. Or sometimes it'll be like, I'm like, well, I got to find a used car. And she's like, have you ever thought about this and that? Like, it's just light. It's just like, honestly, chit chat with a friend sometimes. But then every once in a while, we'll get on the phone. I'll be like, so, everything in my home
Things
is
are bad.
Everything in my home is tense. And I once again have decided that my career has been a failure, ultimately. And she's like, okay, let's get back to work then. So she's kind of on retainer at this point for when she's needed.
it's great.
Sometimes that's sort of like creating that safe holding environment. If you can do that as a therapist, it really mirror a little bit, maybe drop a couple F words here and there, but create that safe holding environment where you can go and say anything and not be judged and just kind of put it all out there and feel safe. I mean, would you say what she provides?
100%. She's a human safety net for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I think that's best case scenario for therapy, because then you can sort of grow into who you want to be. You're the expert,
Yeah.
Gary, what about you?
Listening to this, it reminds me, and I wonder if a lot of people have said this before, but the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, it almost feels like that agent-manager thing.
Yes.
Where you hardly speak to your agents.
Yeah.
Right.
Your
manager probably helps you get your agent, which I think is also true.
Yeah.
Psychologist first, psychiatrist second.
Yeah, and our manager, we have the same manager. Yes. I mean, I feel like I could call him at any point over the weekend within reason, and he would talk me through things that have nothing to do with show business. His name's Brian. He's a terrific
great guy.
But I also found that you're as unlikely to find a manager who is creative and innovative, and I think we have that, as you are a creative, innovative, day-to-day therapist. You have to really look for them, and the same is even true of psychiatrists and agents. There aren't many psychiatrists who are adding value, and I feel like I have one now who, I mean, he's extraordinary and got me through the worst of it many times. What I thought was the worst of it, and then I dug deeper, but anyhow, there's a lot of overlap there. And then the other thing is this thing of transference, which I have felt over and over again, because I've had two therapists, long-term therapists, one from my freshman year of college for 10 years, from 89 to 99. And then this therapist I've had since 2006, who a lot of comedians see. His name is Alan.
This guy's legendary.
There's a
legendary comedy therapist.
And he was featured in Esquire magazine.
And also, all the comedians know which other comedians go to see him, which is a huge conflict of interest.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
There's a comedy therapist. I've heard of him.
Yeah.
I have sometimes had the thought of like, man, I wish I was with that guy. Like, you have that industry thought of like, it gives you something to like connect and do bits with other comedians.
What do you see in Alan? Oh, I see Alan.
But I've been at the comedy.
Is he a funny guy?
I've never met him.
He's not intentionally funny. He makes me laugh frequently, but it's not so much that he's funny. He's just, he knows our entire scene, so that he has the shorthand that you could never get with a therapist who isn't seeing other people who haven't gotten any spots at the Comedy Cellar all week.
I mean, this guy is legendary to the point where it's not an exaggeration. I was once at the Cellar, and there's the comics table, which is the famous table that all the comics sit at while they're waiting to do sets. And I was there when I think there were like maybe 10 or 11 people, and it was realized that 6 or 7 of them were all patients of this guy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
I
incredible.
was
It's really
jealous.
something.
Sit down and have a group session.
I mean,
over there.
Chris, it's not over yet. I mean, I don't, Barb
He would see you tomorrow.
If Barb ever retires, I also have no idea how I'm going to learn if Barb ever dies. Like, I don't know what happens.
Maybe that pigeon will tell you.
Yes,
she can send a
pigeon
message.
flies to my house.
A homing pigeon,
Walking pigeon, though. That's not going to fly.
You guys would be interested in this. So we do have the same manager. And we had a conversation I never forgot that, because you're speaking to both of us, because we've both been comedians who are very frank, specifically on HBO, specifically about mental health. Mm-hmm. But my manager, so Career Suicide came out on HBO in 2017.
Yeah.
And then Brian reached out to me and was like, so Gary's doing, also with Judd Apatow producing, like he's been a big protector of both of us. Brian reached out and was like, so he filled me in. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because I've known Gary. I'll never forget the first time I met Gary, and I've admired Gary greatly for many years. I was like, incredible. Can't wait to see it. And Brian was like, do you think you could get lunch? Because with you, we didn't realize what was about to happen. And maybe you could sit him down and just like give him a heads up. Because, and I'm sure you saw your version of it, though I have not followed up like a good friend would have. Like, I was able to tell you, like, oh, I put this out here on HBO, and I anticipate, like, it got feedback, and it felt pretty shocking by the standards of 2017. I think my special actually would feel a little more milquetoast today, which is a good thing. Like, conversation has moved on. It doesn't feel totally shocking anymore. But I received, when I say
thousands of messages. I'm not exaggerating. And I still get them all the time. Like, I'll just get random DMs or Facebook messages from people I don't know. Some of them are like so frank and dark, or people coming up to me in airport terminals or after shows and being like, hey, so I'll never forget once doing Career Suicide off Broadway before it was on HBO, and a whole family waited for me. And it was a dad and 3 of his kids, and they all told me how they had all been hospitalized at different points. And I was like, you know, and I was able to sit down and say, like, you know, like, I've definitely had nights where, like, I remember once so specifically where I was in Atlanta doing a club in a diner. There's this club that, like, half of it's a diner that's an active diner, the other half's a comedy club. And someone came up and told me something so dark, and they were thanking me, but I don't really have any friends in Atlanta that I'm super close with. So I just went and sat in a hotel room all
By
night.
yourself
and just
after that?
was like, thought about it all night. It was like,
become a therapist. I mean, in so many ways.
People want to put you in that position, and you do hear stories like that. And I am someone who's not always built, like, I take on the pain. So you and I went to Eisenberg Sandwich Stop on Fifth Avenue, and I was able to just basically be like, so buckle up. Like, get your infrastructure in place before yours comes out, which I don't know if that was good advice or if you did
How
that.
How similar was your experience?
It was great advice. I a couple of things are going to my mind right now. One thing is that I think I watched Career Suicide while I was in the middle of writing Great Depression, or after I had written it, before I had recorded it, I think. And part of me was like, oh, I don't need to do this. It's already been done so perfectly and so beautifully. And then Brian, and also your watching it at the Montreal Comedy Festival made me feel that I wasn't just going over what you had said, and it was different enough that I didn't feel embarrassed or guilty. So that was very helpful. And that lunch was incredible. But I will say that most of the messages I get, and I do get some from people who are on the brink, were not as dark. They were.
I had checked. They were like, and I don't know why.
That's interesting.
Because I didn't tell any stories of a suicide attempt. My suicide attempts, I waited until the book.
So buckle up
wait
now.
until we were all by ourselves. Just like,
You gotta pay separate for
That's
those.
good.
You gotta pay separate for those.
At night.
You
Just alone.
diversified the revenue streams.
I didn't feel comfortable sharing it in the special. I didn't know how I could make them funny. And then I got a little bit more confidence, and I was like, this is kind of funny that I stuck my head in a bag and it was a sleeve. A toaster sleeve rather than a bag.
Yeah.
I had comfort in talking about dark things at that when I wrote the book. Anyhow, so I think that might be part of the difference, is that the people don't see themselves in my suicide attempts. They didn't know about them because I didn't include them in the special. I did talk about ECT, so I get people asking me about.
I was going to say
about electroconvulsive therapy,
which was really revelatory that you went on and spoke to that.
It's interesting because I asked Brian, I said, do you think people are going to feel really uncomfortable if I talk about having ECT? Because I know I was very uncomfortable whenever anybody would bring it up. I felt so sorry for them and sad for them, and it made me uncomfortable. And he said, no, this is not. But it was your special that opened up a lot of these areas that I felt comfortable, that I didn't have to be the first person. And there's this myth about the 4-minute mile, that once the 4-minute mile was broken, everybody started breaking the 4-minute mile, and it's a complete myth, and it wasn't that common, and it's never been easy. But I will say, you and Maria talking about your hospitalizations or the depth of the darkness did make it easier for me to talk about it, and I'm sure all the other comedians.
But I also had Maria and Mark Maron helped crack it open with his podcast.
Jeez, yeah.
Neil Brennan was right around the same time.
And the show that we did called The Hilarious World of Depression.
John Moe,
John Moe was really helpful. I mean, that was huge.
Paul Gilmartin's show too.
Oh yes, yeah.
There was definitely an apartment on Chairland, another person.
Oh yeah, totally.
Contemporary of when I came. I also feel like I'm not putting myself down to say you are a much better stand-up than I am. And when I did Career Suicide, a lot of people knew me from like my old talk show or TV appearances, but all of a sudden I was here doing this one-man show on HBO, which was really punching above my weight as a stand-up in a lot of ways, too many people's perspective. And I've been insecure about that. I feel like I earned it, and people around the scene, I would like to think, by and large, would say that's true.
I would have never have known that stand-up wasn't your first.
But I wonder if people felt a freedom to message me because I felt more like an outlier. And I think there's truth to that. Like I do look at you and I'm like, oh, you are able to craft stuff in a way that's origami-like that I can't. And that creates like a certain, like, there's a certain layer of that. Whereas I'm like, guys, I dressed up as Batman when I got drunk and I was trying to go. And like, that's just me like rambling endlessly. And then you're like, I don't know. Let me throw in the word scatterbrain. And it's like, and then you're a craftsman and they don't want to mess with that as much would be a guess.
Maybe.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Rancorous, petulant.
We should have a face-off.
Yeah, I thought
Indeed.
was going to happen. I was like, what's going to happen here? And the very idea that you're saying, you know, my incredibly successful special on HBO, I think proves that I'm not great at stand-up. Seriously. I was like, Chris.
You know, I think because I had a Comedy Central half hour before that was just 2 stories, which was the only time they did 22 minutes, and I told 2 jokes. That's how long my jokes are.
That's amazing.
Because I came from like an improv and storytelling background.
But I feel like that's modern stand-up.
In some ways. But I think for a lot of people, they're like, I don't know who this guy is. And that gives me the freedom to feel like I can send him a DM right now.
So more of a stranger.
And saying like, hey, should I call 911? And I actually had I remember I was still working on my TV show then, and my showrunner one time came into my office and he kept asking me to do something. I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm caught up in this other thing. And he finally was like, what was it? And I was like, I'm answering Career Suicide messages. And he was like, oh, we gotta, like, you can't personally have a dialogue with every single person who reaches out to you about this. It's gonna kill you, man. And that was scary for me. So I'm glad it didn't happen to you.
Yeah.
None on that.
That's awesome.
Scale.
I'm very jealous. I'm very jealous.
That when people reach out about ECT, Gary, to you, I mean, when I first heard that, and as someone who went to school for, psychology, and I remember even the first class when I learned about ECT, I'm like, we still do that? That's like, this is pretty extreme, and but then I started to learn more about it, and they talked more about the cells being able to, the neurons regenerating from it. And then hearing your experience, I was like, I'm so glad we still do this. And I just wanted to put something together, and I don't know if this is, if this is a coincidence or not, but your famous abbreviation of the States bit, which is, I rarely hear a comic talk about other comics without bringing up you.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Bit. Wow, it is legendary and incredible.
It's kind of every comedian's favorite.
Yeah, it's like
favorite late night set.
It's incredible. But you had mentioned, I think, recently that it was like 4 months after ECT that you maybe wrote that bit. Was it or performed it?
No,
or
I think it was
the timeline.
It was that I did that on Conan a few months after I had gotten out of the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact timing, but it wasn't that much longer after I'd been hospitalized that I did that on Conan, and I had a fairly lengthy remission in my symptoms after being hospitalized and having the ECT that intersected with an opportunity to do that on Conan.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it didn't. That particular round of ECT, I should have maintained because it was the next round, and I think I did the outpatient that seems to have done the trick, along with a dozen other things. So it's nearly impossible. You know what it's like to do testing of things, whether this worked. It could just be the timing of the seasons, or who knows. But the thing that is unprecedented in my battle with depression is the durability of this remission, in that it's been since October of 2017 that I've not felt good. I felt terrific. Like
You've used the word joy.
Joy.
I mean, to see the Great Depression.
Has anybody? You guys might know. Like, has anybody in the psychological realm done more for brand revitalization than Gary Special did for ECT?
No, it's a man named Sherwin
really true.
Newland.
No, but dude, publicly,
I don't think so.
I had already talked about it. And I remember when I realized you were going there, because before your special, even people like me who were like, no, we got to talk about this more, heard about that and thought like, oh, that's like medieval, like someone chained to a wall, type stuff.
Right.
And then I was like, oh no, it's like modern and new and doing good.
Yeah.
And it's not that thing that we all think of. Like, that's when you think of like, oh, like they used to lobotomize people in hospitals up on hilltops and stuff. Like that's what people thought of.
Which wasn't that long ago, unfortunately.
That's what people thought it was. And then your special is the thing where I think a lot of people went like, oh, I guess they've updated. I guess they put out the Windows 98. We're not doing 95 anymore.
Yeah.
I got the new version of this, I guess.
I've been pretty depressed a few times in my life and very, very down. I was still scared to death of going in and being shocked,
It's interesting because my wife says, I want to skip the whole being depressed part, but go right to the ECT, because I've seen what it's done for you in terms of your creativity.
Just to get ahead of it. She wants
to get depressed.
She's like, I want in on that.
Just so that she can get to the place you're at
think
now.
it's not a last resort, but I think you have to prove some sort of what is it? Treatment-resistant depression.
That's the prereq.
Here's what you gotta say. You gotta go in there and say it's not getting any better.
Yeah.
And I need what I saw on Gary's special.
Yeah.
We call it the Gary Special.
Now ketamine though. Like ketamine was a thing that for years I was like, you'd fall into the K-hole in college.
Also sounds terrifying.
And now it's like they have these therapies where it's like a therapist will sit on Zoom and talk you through it as you do ketamine at home in the comfort of your home. I'm like, really? Because I always thought that was like an animal tranquilizer that sends you to a mysterious place called the K-hole.
It is.
And
it
now,
still is. Yeah, I think it's the dosage.
I think it's just incredible that these things that got labeled as terrifying, there are people taking a deep breath. Mushrooms as well. There's a lot of people going, well, if it helps a veteran stop reliving the horrors of war, maybe we can stop talking about it like you're going to go on a bad trip and never come back. I think it's really really credible, and I think history will look back and say like Gary Gulman's special was when a lot of people started thinking differently about this one particular thing. I think that's just really true.
That's really interesting. But I think the ketamine, the psilocybin mushroom, the microdosing, as detailed in Michael Pollan's excellent book called Changing Your Mind. The one thing those three things seem to have in common is this idea of a reboot or an unplugging and replugging, and that's what but also the neurogenesis that it would be impossible to prove, I'm sure, but I've never been more productive and creative in my life, and it almost feels like that movie with Robert De Niro and Bradley Cooper, where
Limitless?
Can I add one resource to the Great Depression? And I think it's much better for the Great Depression in terms of people understanding ECT is a YouTube. What are those things called? TED Talk on YouTube by Sherwin Newland, who was a doctor who he said he was just catatonic for a really long time. And they had stopped using ECT, and he was a surgeon, and they said, well, we could give him a lobotomy.
Ooh.
And this one intern said, could we try this thing that has fallen out of favor and fashion and give him low dosages of this ECT? And he said it took like 20. I'm not exaggerating when I say in three treatments, the anxiety that had crippled me went away. It was inpatient, three visits, and I was like, oh, I don't dread life the way I did a day ago.
I would say from what I've seen, as a therapist, this is like miraculous. And I think you're not the only one, but it's so encouraging to hear. And we talked to a lot of doctors and people sort of doing the research, and different treatments. And so I think any case where you can again, also, because I think so many of the thoughts we have, and I can tell you as someone who's gone through depression off and on almost my entire life, the thoughts that you have are that it's not your brain. It's not your biology.
Yeah.
It's you. You said that. Like,
that's
you're not
the
good
problem.
At this. Yeah. Like life in general. Like, and I feel like there's no joke that gets to it better than life. The thing they don't tell you. This is my best Gary impression. It's not very good. The thing they don't tell you. It's every day. Yeah.
But the thing with every other disease is the disease doesn't tell you that it's you who caused this and deserve this, and it's not a broken arm. It's your broken will and your character. So
but it's all watching everything that's happened with you the past few years, Gary, is also because like I can say as someone who's been around New York comedy for 24 years now, Gary and I forget when there was a show at a space called Arlene's Grocery where I was being heckled. And
weird.
A bouncer went up to this woman who had been heckling every comic and said, "Ma'am, you're going to have to go." And he was a tall, strapping bouncer, and I was thankful for him. And then 2 comics later, they're like, "And now Gary Gulman." And I was like, "I've heard this guy's name for a while." So Gary came out, and I I love this person forever.
You buried the lead on this whole podcast.
That's how we met. That's how we met. But I can say, like, and not to get super weird, but like, you were a guy who everybody always loved, and you'd go up and tell jokes, but you were also a guy who sometimes you just wouldn't see Gary for a few months at a time. You'd be, and it would be like, "Oh, Gary's out of town chilling out." And you'd hear stuff like that, you know? And then to see the past handful of years, one of the things that's really cool about what you're doing right now and leading by example with is there's the whole push of like, will you still be funny if you go out and try to solve your psychological problems? And not only are you experiencing joy and as funny as ever, but what I'm able to know from living the same lifestyle as you is like, I look at the size of the venues you're doing now, the pace of the touring, the fact that you put out a book while doing all that. And I go, oh, the depression doesn't help or hurt the creativity. The creativity was always there. But now that you've dealt with so much of that, the ability to organize, the ability,
the executive function.
Dude, like I see your schedule and I go, 10 years ago, would you have been able to handle the pace of that travel without meltdowns? Because I know what it's like to be like on a flight delay with your heart pounding because you're going to miss a show. And then you make the show and the show sucks because you've spent all day freaking out. Like those are the types of things that I sit here and I go, the whole myth of you need to be sad to be creative. It's like, no. Gary's the perfect example, and he's doing it right now as we speak of like, Gary went out and not only did he not sacrifice his creativity, look at the level of organization and versatility you're able to have in all these other ways that facilitate your creativity that are impossible to achieve if you can't get out of bed in the morning.
Being efficient and effective with severe depression or anxiety or in a lot of other things is a lot of times I'd describe it like trying to do math on a roller coaster. Yeah. It is so freaking difficult, you know, and trying to keep this so my son can hear it. But, you know, like that's a great point. If you've seen Gary's most recent special or you've, read this book, which is incredible. And I would say the same, Chris, for your most recent audiobook, which I just got the chance to hear, which is also incredible. You guys are both relatively doing well. And this is like some of your best stuff. I mean, that, in my opinion.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well,
it feels good.
The other thing is that I'd forgotten about and was reminded of recently was there would be these periods where for 6 months I couldn't get anything done. I would just be in various fetal positions.
Not just the one.
Yeah.
Turns out there's more than one.
I had a number of fetal positions. Because if you look at a baby, it's not the same.
Sort of like a shrimp as
same fetal position.
Yeah.
Various fetal positions.
Don't typecast it to one position.
As much as 6 months at a time. And then you come out of it and you feel good. But it's also like, I'm so backed up with things that I had to do. I have to do my taxes. I have to also do this thing that I hadn't done in so much time, which is enjoy my life. Like be happy and not have deadlines and things, and so you're barely able to catch up producing new things. It's
Let
just
alone all the people you have to like awkwardly explain what was going on and or apologize to about stuff, and that's draining.
And it's just it's constant catch up, and then you know that perhaps the next time it starts to get cold and the leaves fall, you're going to be back in the same position, and it's just that you can't plan on things. I would say, all right, I could tell Brian, our manager, that I'm going to work on this proposal for a book, but I know that if they were to give it to me, I wouldn't be able to come through because I would fall apart at the first obstacle. I would get discouraged and abandon it and let everybody down and have to give advances back. And so this was
a terrible feeling,
right? This was the first time where I was like, no, I think I can have 2 years of uninterrupted productivity and promise to write this book.
And then, as an addendum to everything I would just say about what Gary said about those stretches, and then you come out of them and you have to be creative, but there's all these other. You got to get your life back on track. You got to get your relationship back on track. I've been thinking a lot lately about all the people who are like, well, do you have to be depressed to be a comedian? And I'm glad we're moving on from that. But I would say if you are depressed and you're a comedian, you're also living a lifestyle where to make money, you might be waking up in a city where you literally don't know any. You're just waking up in Phoenix and you've got a whole day to kill. And who wants to be a depressed person with a day to kill and nobody to lean on and your family's far away? And also if you have a manic fit, there's no one around who knows your usual behavior for you to be accountable for.
Wow.
If you
accurate historian to kind of say, bring you back down or bring you back.
Yeah. And like you're in an environment where sometimes the only people you talk to are in the comedy club and they don't have the problems you do. So what do? When the night's over, they drink at the bar at the club. And that's the social thing you have available to you is you can drink. Well, what if you're someone who, like me, drinking brought out all your negativity and anger and made you go crashing down. If you're somebody who acts out sexually and you're in a city where...
And you're lonely.
And you're terribly lonely and you have absolutely no one who knows where you are to be accountable for. Well, there's so many ways to find trouble wherever you're at. It's just a lifestyle. So this whole idea of like, do comedians need to be depressed? I don't think that's true. And a lot of my favorite ones are not. I think if you are depressed, it's a lifestyle where you can hide for a very long time and where people are not going to notice your worst tendencies until it's a little too late.
Wow.
And that's happened so many times.
Yeah.
Because you wake up in Winnipeg some days and you're like, it's February. I remember when I was doing shows in Minneapolis. I did shows in Minneapolis in February once where I went to go walk around. And I love Minneapolis. But the sidewalks were a literal sheet of ice that I couldn't walk around. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just go watch weird Japanese wrestling videos all day
as one does
until I go and brave the cold to go do my show. And it's like, how can I not be depressed if this is all I can do?
Chris, when we first started talking and getting to know each other, you shared a time in your life with me kind of leading up to career suicide about being in no shade to the middle of the country, but there's not, talk about sometimes there's not always something going on, something to do.
Not late at night. And if there is, I don't know enough about the place to know what it is.
Well, and I would say the place didn't always know enough about you to laugh at your jokes. You mentioned, nights where you would have a day by yourself. You would then go do your show and play to a crowd that maybe not one laugh.
Oh, that would happen in New York. That would happen in my home base.
That would make someone who's not depressed.
That's
feel
the
depressed.
other thing, too, that we can both speak to. Because, like, when you're building a special, you're going to bomb. Some stuff's going to work. Some stuff's not. And when you're figuring out what works and what doesn't, and the things you're testing out are things you've always been too scared to tell your mom or your closest.
How did you do it?
And then I would be at the UCB Theater, which Gary can tell you, like, there was a stretch of time where when I tell you I had the keys to the place, the hottest comedy stage in the country, and I had the keys. I was the king of that theater. I'm like on my home turf where I am the king of that place and bombing while I'm talking about the darkest stuff that I've kept hidden from some people on my,
I had a friend from college. This guy, Egyptian Mike, was his nickname to all of us. We lived on the
You can't say that anymore.
same floor freshman year. Freshman year, he was Egyptian Mike, and he was one of my best friends in college. And after college, he kept inviting me out. Hey, a bunch of us from the old days are going skiing. I'm like, I don't ski. Oh, a bunch of us are getting dinner at a restaurant. Oh, I'm busy. And he came and saw Career Suicide, and he pulled me aside and was like, how come you never told me any of this? And I was like, not only could I not tell you, I was like, you have so consistently tried to remain my friend, and I have so consistently rejected it because you were around for so much of the worst era that just being around the crew of people you're inviting me to hang out with, I feel ashamed and I feel scared it's going to come back. And like, it's one thing to come up with a joke and be like, oh, yeah, breakfast cereals used to have better names. Let's go try that out. And if that bombs, who cares? But when you're like, oh, you guys, when I was in college, I once drank to the point where I couldn't see and then woke up in a random house with people I didn't know. And they stare at you in silence on that. And you're like, my brother doesn't even know that.
Right.
Yeah.
But then what would happen is, and I don't know if this happened for you testing materials, sometimes it would be like, I'd hear like one sick giggle from the back of the room.
Wow.
And invariably that person would wait for me after the show and be like, I get it, man. And I'd be like, all right, okay, that's one. That's one. Yeah. But that was what became very cool for me, was realizing, I remember I had some friends of my wife came and saw the show at Union Hall in Brooklyn, which has been another sort of home turf venue for a lot of us.
Yeah,
a lot of
it's
comedians.
terrific,
it's the best.
my word.
And you can experiment there, and it's the best. But this couple waited for me afterwards, and they were like, our kid, I think was 7 or 8 at the time, and they were like, a doctor said he should probably medicate it. And we brushed it off and rolled our eyes because he's 7. And they were like, we're not saying we're going to go run and get a prescription, but we're going to go back to that doctor and ask more questions now because we want to at least hear out what they have to say. And that was super deep for me. And then similarly, another show at Union Hall, I remember this girl came up to me kind of in a panic and was like, hey, I dated this guy and he was bipolar, and it was really fun when it was fun, and then it was really hard and confusing when it wasn't. And I just kind of got tired of it and ghosted him, and we had dated for a few months, and I know it hurt him. And I just watched your show, and I kind of just like realized that I probably shouldn't have ghosted him. And I was like, first of all, like, dating me with, like, when I've been at my worst, it's not fun to date me. So don't feel bad. Dating a bipolar person is difficult. So don't feel bad for any choices you made. I was like, also, she was like, what should I do? I was like, maybe you should just text him and say all the stuff you just said to me.
Yeah.
And I bet it would mean a lot to him.
Mm.
And she was like, okay. And like turned around and ran out. And I was like, oh, that became my goal, was like, it's one thing, because I can hear the half a dozen other depressed people laughing at stuff while everyone else is like, what did we come here for?
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is not to get the other depressed people to laugh. The goal is to get the people who have never understood this a day in their lives to go, oh, right. Oh, like I remember Ira Glass. I had done This American Life a few times, and Ira Glass once came to Union Hall when I was working at the show, and he gave me notes afterwards. And it was really eye-opening because he's brilliant. He's a genius.
Brilliant.
Sure.
And he was like, so the one thing I have, he's like, it's just a story structure thing. He's like, it always sticks in my head with story structure because that's how I think. And he's like, you're the protagonist of the story, and there's all these beats of the story. But he's like, my problem is that just thinking of you he was like, separating you, just thinking of the protagonist of that story just isn't learning and growing from his lessons. And I was like, I looked at him and I was like, oh, like, that's why it's an illness. Like, that's why it's an illness. And he was like, I've never thought of mental illness that way before. Of like, you can't learn from it like I can.
It's hard to learn
like if
from
I have a thing, I don't repeat it because I see the negative effect. Whereas you have a thing, and not only do you repeat it at a level that gets more severe and more disastrous.
Well,
and
it's
more
like
harmful.
a fish in water. Like when you're depressed, it's always like a slap in the face when you talk to someone who's not.
And you realize, they think I'm sad. Well, I'm like, I would kill for sad. Are you kidding me? You got sad? Give me some. I would kill to feel anything right now.
I don't think they think I'm sad. I think they're ignorant, and also I'm jealous.
Right. And I can't trust you because you don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
That was very eye-opening for me to realize, like, oh, I was just able to get across. And Ira Glass is a brilliant guy. I'm not saying I've taught him much of anything in life, but in that moment to realize, like, oh, he just realized I keep making the same mistakes, and that's why I need pills for it, because I don't have what he has. He was like, oh, and I was like, that's what this show has to be for everybody. This show has to be for the people down the hall from the depressed person or next to them in a classroom. Like, that's the person I got to get to understand because they legitimately don't.
But it's so brave because I can picture myself trying to adapt the story to make Ira Glass happy.
That's what you're going to do.
My instinct is like, I'll do whatever Ira Glass is. Yes. He's Ira Glass.
Yeah, but and that's what makes it.
Did you? Where were you working out Great Depression?
At the Comedy Studio in Harvard Square,
and
which is a
that's
comedy
a
club
above
you, right? A Chinese food restaurant, which is my that was my
for Bostonians.
For the alt movement in Boston. That was where it happened. But it was also beginner comedians there, so I kind of looked pretty good at the end, even when I was bombing because it wasn't a one for me, one for you, which some comedians do.
Yes.
But it was, I'm going to go 20 minutes and then I'm going to kill at the very end. But for 20 minutes, it's going to be very uncomfortable. And
so you would hold something in the chamber?
And I knew I had something at the end, which was this joke, which was clearly about being depressed. Fork prints in the ice cream. But I had never said that the reason, that the reason I eat ice cream every night at the end of the day and eat it with a fork because I can't do dishes is because I'm depressed. And I had added that component to this joke that I had not been honest about or not been completely honest about. So I had that in the chamber and I would do 20 minutes of just bombing and working these things out. But a lot of the people who went on the comedian on the comedy show were one or two times they had been on stage. So I at least looked professional while falling apart on the stage and had some skills. So that was very helpful, but also, and I'm glad you reminded me about this. At some point in my career, I was convinced that to set myself apart from the other comedians, I would meet everybody after the show. And then they would want to come back because they got to meet me, not because of the jokes or anything like that. It just was
sounds exhausting.
A symptom of depression, which is that these people need something extra to want to see me. Anyhow, I was doing that and I could bomb with these jokes about depression, but there would be people in the line afterwards who'd tell me that it connected with them or that it resonated with them. And I'd never gotten anything like that before in any of my meet and greets where I was really connecting. And that kept me going because there were also, I remember the manager at the Dr. Grins in Grand Rapids showed me a few comment cards where they were just very angry that I had talked about depression. And I also had Brian telling me, our manager, no, keep going in this direction.
He's the best
really,
for that.
This is really helpful. And he also, in talking about managers or psychologists that add value, Brian was the one who said, it would be interesting if you did a hybrid of a comedy show with documentary footage about your treatment. And that was a game changer. That was really helpful.
But how eye-opening is it for people to hear, like, Gary's ability to pull off something that was that meaningful to so many people depends on your ability to withstand criticism from patrons of a place called Dr. Grins in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm serious about that because I know that means you went to some hotel room in Michigan that night.
Oh, yeah.
And sat there and thought about that card.
I wish I had kept the card, but I don't have that kind of...
It's like somebody's like, I'm just out to eat mozzarella sticks at Dr. Grins, man. And here you are trying to connect about the human condition.
Because I had enough of an audience. I did not have the audience I have now. I had enough of an audience from that joke about the abbreviating the states because Patton Oswalt shared it on his Facebook page. And so I had enough of an audience that I could sell a couple hundred tickets in a number of cities, but not enough of an audience where they weren't all there to see me.
Right.
A lot of them were there to see a comedy show.
That's
and
not
be
depressed.
And so I couldn't work out any of this at the Comedy Cellar, for instance, because they were there on the hopes that this guy who was big at the time but has fallen on hard times, Louis C.K. would show up.
Right.
Remember that was the time where Louis would stop in at the Comedy Cellar and he had a show
everyone
that
would
was
lose
set
their
there. And
minds.
everybody they'd lose their minds, or Chappelle, or Rock, or God forbid Seinfeld.
Rare.
Didn't he play Jerry on the show?
Shout out your joke.
These guys would show up,
Your joke, yes.
and they would be surprised at how good everybody else was because they'd never heard of them. But it was, and you could almost feel, and maybe I'm projecting on them, you could almost feel the disappointment if you were the last person on the show and no celebrity had shown up.
Right.
Here's our final performer, and they're like,
Here's Gary.
I got nobody to tell about.
He's obviously sad.
At the water cooler tomorrow. So I had to do a fake routine or fake my joy and affability for 15 minutes because I couldn't really work out. I would occasionally throw in this joke, which would kind of work sometimes if the audience was right after I'd warmed them up for a while. I would say, has anybody here ever been recognized in the psych ward? And I would say, the Weill Cornell psych ward?
of course, everyone then raised their hands. And like,
yeah. So that was it. That was sort of one of those jokes where it was. Sometimes as a comedian, after a while, you get to the point of it might be arrogance, but I think it's confidence where you're like, this is a very good joke. If they don't get it, it's on them.
Yeah, this one's for me.
And so you get
Gary.
a little bit. And when it doesn't do well, you're like, it's them. It's not. This is worth keeping.
I find that I wonder if you would agree with this. Like, it's rare that I can point to times in my life when I was able to summon some confidence, but I can feel that there were times where I accomplished a lot when I hit a very healthy version of like, I just don't care.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I don't care.
Liberating.
And that's not the same as confidence. I'm not confident in the fact that I'm up here telling you about how Adderall made me poop blood. Like, I'm never going to feel confident about that. But I've just decided that I don't care at all.
It's almost like strength in humility, I would say.
And giving up in some ways is very healthy.
I have a basketball analogy.
I can't wait.
All right. So my entire life, basketball was my comedy. And from age 10 to 16, I practiced every day, which was hundreds of shots every day, and would shovel out snow at the park and in front of my house to do drills and everything like that. And then whenever I was in a game, I would get so nervous that I would, if I made my first shot, I would score 30 points. And if I missed my first shot, I would miss the rest of the shots for the rest of the day because I had no confidence. And then my coach, when I was a sophomore in high school, just pretty much told me off and that I was useless. And I was like, I don't care anymore about the results. I was so discouraged. I didn't care about the results. And I never played better basketball than when I didn't care about the results. And I've never done comedy better than when I didn't hold my self-esteem hostage by how the audience reacted to these jokes. And it's such a lesson in humility, but also just the freedom of failure, that it's not going to kill me if I miss this shot, and it's not going to kill me if these people don't laugh at this thing. And also, it seems like one of those things you can only get from experience rather than.
And it's a thing people try to fake, because I would argue that when you see the comedians who go on stage and a joke misses and they're like, whatever, I don't care. Or they're like, I know that one was good.
It.
Screw you guys. I'm like,
I know what you guys think.
You care more than if you're telling me I literally care. You care more than anyone else.
I want you to know I don't care because I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. It's you visibly care. Or it's always a sir.
Yeah, when I it's never ignore. It's but it's this other thing where I notice sometimes when I play basketball, sometimes somebody will not guard me. And that's because they think, well, if he makes the shot, I wasn't guarding him, and if he misses the shot, then I get to celebrate. So it's like that.
They protect themselves a little bit.
Protect themselves from not making the effort. It's like,
I wouldn't guard you. I would see you and I'd be like, no, let's just hope he misses. That's my best case scenario.
It's so irritating.
That's what made you both start. I mean, this is all information and really insightful about what happened once you started doing jokes about mental health and started coming out of being courageous and with the vulnerability on stage. I mean, because there's one thing that I would imagine, be a comedian on stage hoping your jokes are funny. It's another thing to be a comedian on stage hoping your jokes are funny. This is your job. And now you're going to tell them some of the most intimate details of what you're going through and the incredible vulnerability, hope that they can also laugh. How did you start to want to do that?
Some of it's an addiction, if I'm being honest. And at least in my case, there is one way to think of the experience of telling jokes in front of an audience, which is I say something that leads to a moment. And if they laugh at the moment where I was hoping they would laugh, it means they get it. And that means I feel less alone.
Oh, the connection piece.
Right? Like if I can say something succinct where they understand the setup and then I can knock down the punchline, there is a version of it, not all jokes and not all people, but for me at least, where it's like, okay, they get it. I'm less alone. And what I found was I was like, when I would be at UCB doing improv shows, I was playing a lot of depressed or angry characters. And I would get a big response and I'd get to walk away and go, cool, that was a character. Everybody, no one asked me about that. But then I was kind of a very rare, Birbiglia said to me at one point, he was like, out of all the people who came out of that explosion at UCB, he's like, you're the only one who's known by your own name. Like everyone else is known by the name of the characters they played or the show they wound up writing for.
Wow.
He's like, who else from UCB is known as, like, you're the only one who did that. And I do occupy that weird space. And I think for me, a lot of that process was, okay, I'm starting as an improviser where I can play a version of myself that has plausible deniability if anybody asks me about it. Now I'm starting to do these storytelling shows that are popping up at the alternative spaces, which was really big, you remember, in like 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now I'm telling stories. And storytelling shows were nice for someone like me because I had a lot of stage experience. But when you advertise something as a storytelling show, an audience does not expect a certain number of punchlines. They're willing to go with you. So that felt very safe and easing into it. And that was another way of like, okay, now I can tell a real story, but in a very sensitive room in front of a sensitive audience. And then I was very inspired by some of the comedians I was seeing around town who I realized could go anywhere. And for my generation, the two that I always think about was Mike Birbiglia and John Mulaney.
Oh, wow.
Were these guys who would show up at UCB and they'd be like, we got to run because we're going to do the Comedy Cellar and then we're going to go do a show out in Brooklyn and then we're stopping by Caroline's. And you're like, those are all different things. So I got obsessed with like going all city like that. That's how I would think of it. Like, can you go anywhere in the city and get them to connect with you? And that became an obsession.
I only have ever thought about the downside to being vulnerable in front of a big group of people. I don't think I've ever thought of, wait a minute, if you can go around to anywhere in a city and talk about your most intimate struggles and be totally vulnerable and they still love you, that's like the ultimate upside feeling. Is that what you're talking about?
I would say it is not dramatic for me to say that there have been stretches of my life, and this is not healthy to need to depend on comedy this way because comedy often fails. So if you need it and it fails, that's a bad day the next day.
And I think we all have our versions of that. Mm-hmm.
I was dependent on it, but it's not an exaggeration for me to say that there have been stretches of my life, multiple times throughout my life, where I have been very, very lonely in an intense way for 23 hours and 45 minutes. And then the 15 minutes where I get on stage is the 15 minutes of the day where I do not feel lonely. And that, to me, is, if you can see that perspective, you're like, of course I wanted to share the dark things as I got more and more comfortable because I felt like I couldn't talk about them to my family, to my mom, to my brother, to my significant others. Like, but I can go on stage and if people laugh, I go, oh, wow, they just laughed at something really messed up. Cool. Okay. They felt that too. And that's like this brief respite where I feel like I'm going like, oh, I just got to take a breath. And now, is that healthy to say that I can only feel that loneliness go away if I'm on a stage with a spotlight pointed on me and an amplification device? No, it's not healthy.
You wouldn't be the only
one.
True. But yeah, I think
true.
that makes sense. Is that, what would you say, Gary, is there any similarity there for?
One thing that I keep thinking of, that there were sort of two tracks. One was that maybe I didn't have to, but I gave myself an excuse where you have to acknowledge how shaky you are and what you look like and how disheveled everything is. And
some comics don't.
But you rolled out of bed to get to this show, and you don't look like yourself, and so I would have to come up with lines and jokes about being depressed and stories. But the other side was I had just spent time in the hospital, which I was convinced like that's the worst thing that could ever happen to you is to go into the hospital, and all based on media depictions of all from
what are they going to
Girl
think?
Interrupted and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and so I wanted to think that there was a reason behind it, a meaning to it, which is I can come back and tell my story and make people feel a little bit better and dispel the myths about the hospital and the ECT, which is a delusion of grandeur, right? It sounds like the Odyssey or something like that. But
if it hadn't worked,
there was part of me that felt like I have to find some meaning in this. And then when I started to feel so great, I was like, all right, now I'm obligated to share this. Now I'm on a mission. And I don't know if this was the case, and it doesn't matter because sometimes obstacles are there and you look back and you say, well, it was a test or whatever. And I'm so glad I kept going. But the project was blessed from the beginning, from the moment I shared a 20-minute tape with an audio with Brian. He said, you should continue in this trajectory, write more jokes about being depressed in the hospital. And then he said, there's this man who did some work on your special named Mike Bonfiglio, who's a documentary director. I'd like you to meet with him. And I met with him, and this never happens in show business. He said, yeah, let's do this during the meeting. Mm-hmm. And he said, do you mind if I ask my friend Judd to be a part of this? And I was like, well, if you feel it'll help us. And so he called Judd and sent some video maybe or something, or maybe just Judd did him a favor, but whatever it was, he was like, all right, I'm on board.
And did you know Judd at all before that?
Yeah, he had come to the Comedy Cellar and done sets. And I remember thinking, I don't want to say anything to him because everybody's probably pitching ideas to him. And so there's the possibility that he thought I was standoffish, or I just didn't want to bother this guy. And I would say hello, but I never really said too many things to him. And so I was like, there's a possibility you're going to say, oh yeah, that guy who ignores me at the Comedy Cellar table every night. I want to work with him. But honestly, the truth is I didn't want to be one of those people who was irritating him.
Yeah.
Because it was a thing. And anyhow, he said, yeah, I think Gary's funny and I want to work with him. And then it fell into, I did one audition for HBO, and like 2 days later, they gave us an answer.
It moved really quick.
It moved really quick. Once I had, and the other thing was I only had about 15 minutes of stand-up on depression. And when I started working with Mike, the director, and he said, I don't mean to be mean, but you're not famous enough for us to do a documentary about your treatment. You really need to write more jokes about being depressed. And I remember thinking, and that's where it went off the rails, and it didn't happen. Because how am I going to come up with another? But thanks to ECT and caffeine and the psychotropic cocktail I'm on, I was able to come out with more than we needed. We wound up cutting things, and so it was blessed from the beginning.
I want to go back to earlier, and it's when you said to Chris, hey, I almost didn't do this because I felt like it had already been done. You already did it with career suicide. And then me hearing that as someone who's been incredibly blessed by both of your ability and courage and encouragement to be vulnerable, and then to make something that is so upsetting, so funny, and to disarm mental illness in a way. But my first thought was, that's two pioneers, two out of the, and we talked about Bamford and Aparna and a couple other comedians that I think belong in that trailblazing category of being open and honest and real about their mental health and making it funny. But my first thought was, what if that, and I'll call that, I'm going to an automatic negative thought because that's all I can, and I don't want to diagnose or say anything, but when I heard that, I thought, what if that thought, Chris has already done this and there's no room to build on this, there's already one,
Right.
If that had taken hold. And so I want to thank you both for changing thousands of lives, for making a scary monster, some of the worst suffering a human can go through at times, not only relatable, not only more of a point of connection and less stigma, but just less scary and even funny. It was freeing to hear, Gary, when you first, I think it was, It's About Time. You have one line in there and you said, and I'm on everything but roller skates.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wait
That was
a
the
minute.
prequel.
That was the
that was like the one joke here. Yeah.
Everyone calls me anytime someone does something really successful around, especially comedy and mental health, anything. And I had several people call me about career suicide and say, you got to see this. You got to see this guy is raw. And for me to watch career suicide and think, as a person who was trying to do good in the world, trying to be helpful, but also felt depressed and like I was carrying a huge weight at the same time, almost like that doing math on a roller coaster thing. But to see you on an HBO special saying things that I could completely relate to, but you were doing it from a point of success. The very special itself was successful. So it gave me so much hope as to like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this because this guy, obviously more hilarious than just about anyone I've ever heard of, is making this and into something where he's talking about the insecurities that he has, how all it fits together and contributes to automatic negative thoughts, and then to build again with the Great Depression. It's allowed me to talk to even other leaders in the mental health space and given me a point of reference to be able to say, yeah, I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about it in a completely depressing way. For one reason is because I'm afraid I'll get depressed again. But another reason is because I don't think it always has to be presented in such a pathological and horrible way. And it can be, at this point in life, if you're not sort of depressed or a little bit depressed and willing to talk about it, that's just not, it doesn't feel real to me at all. Those are the main things I wanted to cover. I just wanted to really come through with a thank you to both of you, and to, on behalf of the mental health community, on behalf of the people that are struggling, which is often the same. I was getting depressed. I got depressed super quickly, in that job. I would go, do a McDonald's run in between and use my coping skill, which was cheeseburgers and that Sunday, and then I come back like, ice cream on my face. Well, there's a joyful place. You're just not there right now. And we got to think about that, and so I just think to be able to, even in some cases prescribe somebody special, and you've just given a whole new avenue to talk about mental health, to destigmatize it, and to make it much less scary. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. And it's been, I've gotten a lot out of it too. So I'm happy to do it, and I'm glad I had the strength to do it. And also, I feel like I stood on Chris's shoulders most of the time.
There's no world. He's protected me from hecklers from day one. He's a guardian angel. Guardian angel.
If there's any incredibly funny, talented comedian out there right now thinking, I'm not going to talk about my mental health because we've had as many as 4 other comics come out about it, and there's other ones too. There's Eddie, there's Mark Maron, there's there's a few. I don't think there'll ever be enough. And so I would want to encourage anyone who may be listening to this, that they would not think it's already been done, and they would build on what you both have done as well.
To be totally pretentious, there is, some school of thought that comedy is at its best when it's speaking truth to power. And I think one of the things that bums me out about comedy lately is like,
picking on trans people, that's not speaking truth to power, if you ask me. Like, they got it bad enough. They got it bad enough without us being on. So I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal or put anyone else down, but I do think, the stigma surrounding this stuff had a really strong grip for decades and decades. Going back to, the post, like my parents' experience, like, probably started at World War II values
in time to the beginning of time.
Yeah. So
you're not like me, you're different, so I'm better, and here's why I belong and you don't.
Yeah. But I think those stigmas were very, very real. And I always remember there was one kid in my school who went to a shrink, and it was found out, and he was ruthlessly mocked. It was like used to bully him, of like, you see, and I always remember how awful that was. So, it takes more than one person to knock down stigmas like that. So it's very nice for Gary to say that Career Suicide did anything for him. But to me, I sit here, I go, well, if they didn't get it from me, maybe they got it from you. I think there's a lot of people that probably got it from Maria Bamford who don't see themselves in you or I.
Right.
There's people who will listen to some of the stuff that Mark Maron did on his podcast, especially in the early days, where maybe that format got through more than a stand-up performance could, and that does its part, So I think that stigma was so strong, and it still is, but especially back then, it was so strong that it's, it needed way more than one or two people. And I don't think there's this idea that anyone should be able to corner the market on something. If you were doing it in a genuine way, you'd never be like, oh, you ripped off that thing by also being genuine about your human experience.
Heartfelt?
Right. And not the difference,
You can
and I think you can, you look at me and Gary and Aparna and Maria Bamford and Neil Brennan's Three Mics and so many of these specials. And I think you can see how they are sort of like respectful pieces of a puzzle that you can connect if you so choose. And I don't think any of those people that I just named would out there and be territorial about like, well, it's not exactly like Gallagher with fruit, like it's not an act.
I'm going to smash this
it's a real
watermelon
thing.
Of depression.
It's like a real thing that has destroyed many lives. You can't corner the market on that. And if you want to, you have not achieved a point of mental health proficiency that you're ready to be talking about it.
Doing a little bit of research, going back and rewatching Career Suicide, there was a critic that said, Chris is vulnerable and honest and funny and hopeful, a deft storyteller and living proof that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that sometimes there's even light inside the tunnel too. I felt like, okay, if anyone wants to know if they should go watch it.
Guns and Ammo.
Sportsman's Weekly.
Guns and Ammo. It's the only positive review we got. I was shocked. I was kind of dismayed.
As Road and Track said.
And with the Great Depression, someone said, for such a dark subject, it has no business being as hilarious as it is. Gulman is just that talented. So I want to leave everyone with those two thoughts. If they're wondering, if they maybe haven't, it's rare. And I rarely will bring up either of you guys and someone hasn't heard of you, or hasn't watched, something, or, but if that is the case, the humanity that you put into comedy is unparalleled. And it's something that I think we can benefit from, even to the point where it's helpful for our mental health. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome back to Marlon Helps. So, as we said at the beginning of this episode was recorded a little while ago. We weren't doing Marlon Helps yet. I'm excited now that we get to reflect on this episode. And I'm going to ask you a question that I've been kind of thinking about since this episode was recorded a year ago. It's our fourth episode.
Since you were the first live audience
That's right.
We ever had.
I think our first actual meeting too. Beyond
in person.
Beyond So there's this, and it gets talked about a lot in the episode, and Chris and Gary talk about it in their own way and what they kind of had to realize, but I'd like to hear about this from a professional's side of things. So the myth that suffering fuels creativity. And that to be a good artist, you have to be like vexed and troubled. But as again, Chris and Gary talk about in this episode, that didn't happen for them. What is it that like that you can unlock when you're not like in survival mode or whatever happens when you start to heal?
So when you say this didn't happen for them, you're referring to like when they started to feel better, they didn't get unfunny?
Yes, thank you for saying that more clearly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I think that's I feel like nearly every person I've talked to who is funny for a living feels like they're, is nervous about that. Like if if all of a sudden I have nothing to complain about, I don't know. You get like someone like Lewis Black or something. Like, what if he was just like a regular nice person, not very upset?
Yeah, right.
But I think it's true for some people. I think some people have made a living off of, sort of having a relatable discontent about them. So who else? Wait, just give me a few others. Like who else?
Mark Maron.
Oh, that's a great one. I think Eddie Pepitone. He's
another really good one.
I don't think you can. I mean, he's hilarious, but I can't imagine he'd be that funny if he was in a good mood. I've never seen it.
That's the fear. But do we think, and I guess the question for me and or our listeners who aren't interested in being stand-up comedians, though, is the fear that like getting better might make you less interesting, less yourself, if that's something that's been so part of you. Again, whether you've made a career out of it or not. Like, what do you say to somebody who is worried that who they are is so tied up with that part of them wants to heal from?
I would answer that question by saying, I think the fear is real. I think there's truth in it. I don't think you're going to be funny in the same way. But, it's like that. You ever heard of the Yerkes Dodson anxiety, the inverted U of anxiety? It's sort of like you get your performance goes up when you get anxious, but just the right amount of anxious. And it sort of like goes up and it's a U shape, because once you go too far on the anxiety, it goes straight down. And I think that's, there's nothing funny about like a person in the midst of an actual depressive episode. Like some of the thoughts you might have in that state of mind could be funny, even if they're dark. But like standing up on stage and telling jokes and making people laugh is already incredibly challenging. So if you're really, really down or, not feeling in your, like yourself or in your right mind, then I think everything's going to be harder, including being creative and thinking of new material that doesn't just bum everyone out. Cause like you can't just go like, even if you think about Chris's career suicide or, the Great Depression from Gary, it still has to be palatable and funny. Otherwise it's just like a sad documentary.
And also organized. And there are things that you probably don't have as much access to when you're in the throes of it that you do when you're not. And so it sounds to me like maybe there's a trade-off there too.
I would say I don't think there's a real right or wrong answer, because again, it's what type of funny are you looking to be? And if you are good at something and creative, but you have such a weight on your shoulders of the mood you're in, or you can't get out of a certain thought or feeling, then it's not going to matter what you do. But I think the actual truth to it is being in pain. If you think about this is true, I think, for everyone, really. It's hard, it's rare that I could say that, but I think this is true for everyone. When you're in pain, really noticeable high levels of pain, the one thing it does is keeps you focused. It keeps you focused on whatever it is you think is going to relieve that pain.
Fascinating, yeah.
So if you're a funny person and jokes make you laugh and they could help to relieve your pain, or if maybe it'll help just a little bit to get that feeling to subside a little bit, then I do think in some ways you're going to be more focused on jokes and being prolific and trying to create them anyway, whether you're good at it or not. I think that it depends. I mean, all of us can come up with a joke when we're really tired, and maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But, I do think being in pain, especially, the kind of pain that comes with depression, it allows you, often your mind doesn't shut down, it ramps up. So
It's interesting because I think
you become prolific at it.
Yeah, we think of depression, and in a lot of ways it is, I think, as the opposite of that, of the being stuck in bed all day or whatever. The kind of picture that's painted about it, like those commercials where everything's like blue washed. But that you kind of describing it as still being focused on something, and maybe not the quote unquote right thing or whatever. Is
well, you know what else being tortured and does to you is makes it so you don't really give a shit about a lot of stuff. I think when you are not feeling well, like if you have the flu and someone comes to you with something that you don't think is important at that moment because you're dealing with the trying to feel better. So I think that allows you to do shocking things. I think it allows you to take big risks.
That's a great point.
Because you're not, it's not a healthy, I wouldn't call it that the reasons for being funny when you're down or when you're in pain. It's not kind of how I think. You give up a lot. You sacrifice a lot. And, we've seen so many great comics think that or believe that, or maybe the kind of funny they wanted to be did require that, and they didn't feel like they could take those risks, without it. And so a lot of the best, comics ended up dying from things that they did to try to get rid of that pain.
Right.
And so I think I love how Gary and Chris have both gone through some of the worst mental health challenges that you can have and come out the other side. And I think ultimately the best case scenario is you don't need to be in pain to be funny. And you can just really like it. You can just really love comedy. You can just you can make things happy, things that are happy you can make funny too.
That's right.
So yeah, I think there's truth to it. It can drive you, and unhappiness and pain is it's probably the best motivator. But as far as being effective, but if you can come at it as a proactive, healthy, balanced state of mind, and really just love what you do, which is so, I think that's what a lot of us really want. But I think sometimes we settle for the kind of output or content that we get just from being in pain, because you don't have to stay as motivated because you're already motivated to feel better. Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at This Helps Podcast or at thishelpspodcast.com. And if you've ever loved me, if you've ever had a shred of decency in your life, you right now would go to wherever you get your podcasts and you would leave a review. Now, hopefully the review is about how much you love extreme, unexpected guilt trips. And that's fine, because even that review is going to help other people find the show. When you're done there, keep that guilt going and smash that subscribe button on YouTube, because that is actually how most people find the show. YouTube. Who knew? And see you next time.